background is that behind you?
Oh, I haven't changed it. I haven't used this in a while, but it was for this PlayStation game that came out last year called Ghost of Tsushima.
Right. Okay.
Just a great samurai
Absolutely.
fantasy game. It was great. So
Very
very
cool.
cinematic, very beautiful, and
Yeah. So how are things in LA today?
they're good. It's been like a little bit overcast this week. On Monday, Tuesday, it was like kind of gray actually. Kind of reminded me of SF, which I kind of like. But
Right.
yesterday, it's been sunny as usual. So it's been nice.
Right.
It's been nice weather out here, and I've only been out here since October, so I'm still fairly new to the city.
Gotcha.
How about Auckland?
Auckland's, well, it's just getting to be autumn here, but it's probably about the same as it is there because we're kind of in the same. Yeah, so it's kind of sunny today. It rained a bit last night, but there you go.
Nice. I haven't gone before, but I'm looking forward to visiting the Shire at some point.
Okay, all right. And I see, I was reading your bio, and there was a mention of Conan Moccasin in there, who's a Kiwi guy.
Oh yeah.
You know him?
Oh yeah. Well, not personally, but I will say that I think it's a lot of the chorus guitar that we hear in a lot of modern music, especially over the past couple of years, I think could be attributed to him and his usage of like either a Roland jazz chorus or whatever he uses. I think he was kind of one of the first people that was using that, and I feel like he has kind of an affinity for like Serge Gainsbourg and
Right.
And I love his first two albums. I think that it's very it's so unique and so genuine, and he takes so many musical risks. I just think he's like one of the better songwriters that has come up in the last maybe the last 20 years.
You'll be thrilled to hear that, I'm sure. Hopefully you will.
Yeah.
So we talk about you're in LA and you've been there but the record Hella Love is pretty much based around your move, I think, right, from San Francisco to LA.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a collection of songs that I was kind of putting together, and as I was in the early stages of kind of organizing the structure of the songs and the track listing, and I pretty much kept the same order of the material, but I approached lyrics after the fact, and
right.
As I was organizing these songs, I was obviously thinking about moving at the time, and it just kind of struck me that it would be nice to leave my home with like a warm embrace, you know.
So what prompted the move?
It was just one of those things where through music over the past several years, I've had more opportunity to come down to Los Angeles, and
right.
I find that there's just a lot more musicians that I admire, I think, that are down here doing a lot of things that are scary in the right way, where they're like intimidating and it seems like they would push me to kind of enhance my craft more. And I felt that the Bay Area was just, there weren't as many artists that I could like identify with that were doing things that were similar enough to what I'm doing, and LA felt like I have more of a home where my music was a part of a family tree that maybe lives here, you know.
Yep. So this album, I guess, is kind of like a farewell to San Francisco for you, is it?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully someday I can live there again. Now that, but you know, it was kind of an end of a chapter, I would say, definitely.
And when did you record most of the material?
It was early. It started in the actual tracking started February of 2020, early in the month, and then we got most of the like guitar, bass, drums all done.
Yep.
But in March, during the pandemic, when that started, it became a really slow process of us chipping away at everything else with the vocals and the overdubs and the arrangements and things like that. And we finished about September. I think actually about August we finished. We wrapped everything up around then. So it took some time slowly chipping away.
When you say we, I think your engineer is a gentleman by the name of Jason Kick. Were there other musicians as well involved? It sounds like it.
Yeah, there was Well, I'll say that like with most of the albums I've made, I've either recorded most of it myself, but the Hell Love and the previous one, I've used I've worked with a band, so I've kind of like switched it up where I've started to take more of a producer role.
Right.
And with Hell Love, I was fortunate to meet Jason, and it was a surprise to me to find out that he was local, and he'd also worked on a record by Mild High Club, the second record called Skip Tracing, I believe.
Right.
And I love that record. You know, I thought it had a great narrative. It moved really nicely. So I was very excited to work with someone. And Jason, from the very beginning, I could tell that there was a lot of context which he understood with the music I was making, and it was he had certain abilities that as an engineer that I don't have, and
Right.
so it was really fun to kind of piece things together with him. And even prior to like the recording in 2020, when we actually began the tracking, it had been about 6 months of demoing with him, and using him as kind of a reason to get my shit together,
Right.
to show up and get organized and meet up with him. But I found even in the first day that we worked together, some of the final tracks that we worked on as demos ended up being like final cuts. Like Through the Fog was the first song we worked on, and it's
Right.
a weird song in a weird meter. It's like 7, and he was able to like work with me on that very fluidly, and I fell in love with it right away.
Right. Well, it's the second track on the album, just prefaced by a fanfare that's about 46 seconds long, which sounds like there's horns, and are they real horns? I can't tell anymore.
Yeah. I kind of like that idea too, that you're not really sure. But yeah, they were all real arrangements. And fanfare is kind of like a little homage to like the first track that I ever recorded on I think you can only find it on my SoundCloud, but it's under an album that's labeled Chicana, which is like it's an at symbol, so it looks like an A or it could be an O, so it's kind of like ambiguous in terms of the sexual identity. But the first song I tracked was what the melody we used in fanfare, which is kind of like a little homage to that.
Cool. And of course, Through the Fog, I no doubt refers to the infamous San Francisco fog.
In a fog, it's hard to see things clearly, but look how far you've come along, my love.
Absolutely, yeah.
But you do have a song a little later on, Yuesta, Victoria, which I believe addresses the issue of gentrification in the city. Is that a big deal over there?
Goodbye, God bless Golden Bay. This city wishes you could stay. Mission is missing your bundle, say.
Yeah, I mean, the culture has changed quite a bit. The area in which the song was written about was an area that my mom and my family had grown up, and that area is still preserved to some degree. I feel like there is a strong sense of the Mexican American or Latinx community there, and it's still pretty strong, I would say. But it was kind of an interesting subject to sing about, gentrification and wanting to address it. And I just wanted to kind of talk about it in a way that was more like honoring our past and kind of hope for the future, that that we're still here, and that we're still, art and culture are still continuing to thrive. But I feel like the idea of just losing history is just a common theme with San Francisco and a lot of other cities, and LA included, Seattle, Portland, with the move with the increase of tech and all these other industries that have come in and have changed the culture and have raised prices for rent for us natives, So yeah, it was like, it's an interesting subject to sing about, but I had to, the way I did it was just more of a way to like remember and have hope for the future, I think.
Right. It's interesting. The vibe, the sound that you create is very kind of chilled and relaxed, a little jazzy, Latin. It's very, but laid back kind of, but the lyrically, you're trying to get across more kind of things that are on your mind, and it's an interesting justification. So was that something you thought about when you were making the record?
I wanted to, yeah, I felt like the vibe for that song in particular was, it has kind of with the chord changes and everything, it's very like bittersweet. It's like morose, but it's beautiful, and
Right.
it's not too upbeat, but it's also an element of sadness, which I think that's the theme of the sentiment of like, if you look at a pan dulce, like Mexican pastry, they are sweet, but sometimes they're very dry too.
Right.
And so it's this kind of like idea of like, it's sweet because it's the idea of hope, and it's bitter and dry with the idea that it's like, it's we're losing history in a sense, and music and writing and art are ways that we can kind of remember and
Right.
document these sentiments or places or people.
Right. Now, speaking of history, you kind of touch on a couple of historical events that took place in San Francisco. There was the earthquake in 1989, and the occupation of 1969 on island of Alcatraz.
Yeah, you're the first person.
Those.
Yeah, you're actually the first person to ever comment on that. The fact that the Frisco Ball was written about the 1989 earthquake.
I remember watching. I was watching the baseball game, whatever it was. Was it a World Series game?
World Series. It happened to be the Battle of the Bay.
Yeah, yeah.
And so it was Oakland versus like the Giants.
Like, it's like, whoa.
Are you kidding me? Like such a crazy sign. It reminds me of like in October of it had to be 3 years ago in Mexico City, that there was an earthquake in Mexico City the same day as like one of the huge major earthquakes that happened like I don't know, like 10, 15, 20 years prior. And
Right.
So it's just a weird coincidence. But I think there's something really beautiful about people coming together, helping one another, the idea of mortality, and maybe the idea of leaving the Bay Area helped me have a certain perspective when writing this record. Right. And the idea of mortality, and the idea of we live in a place on fault lines, in California. Yeah. So it's like these things could happen again. So it's like the idea, there's something when you're living in a place of like more thinking about mortality, or that you're lucky to have what you have, or it puts me in a place where I'm more appreciative of what I have, and the problems that I have aren't quite as severe. So it was just kind of a reminder that like, let's enjoy it while we can, and also to the idea of unifying people coming together and helping one another in a situation like that. With Alcatraz, it's something a subject that a lot of people don't talk about, or really are it's not really common to talk about it quite as much, but I attribute like these students in the 60s that were really intelligent and making a very positive like and clever movement to occupy federal land on the island. And yep. For me, there's a little personal story where my father had sailed into the Bay Area when that was happening, and he's a Yankee, he's from the East Coast, and right. My mom's a Mexican American from the city, and they spawned their own relationship, obviously. But my father's sailing here, that was happening at the time, and he was delivering necessities, water, toilet paper, things to the island, and it felt like the city was very supportive of them. But I just felt like with a lot of the civil rights movements that were happening and continuing to happen over the last recent years, and even now, it was just important to remember that the power in that. And I think that is just we can only learn from history, and keep these things in mind. And I think it was a success for them to raise awareness amongst their community. Yep. With all the other, civil rights movements that were happening, with Cesar Chavez, with Black Panther, with the occupation of Alcatraz, I felt they were all snowballing and supporting one another, and I just felt it was something that I felt like I just needed to share as a maybe the coolest civil rights movement to occupy an island outside the city. It's definitely the most powerful statement.
And speaking of civil rights movements, of course, there's lots of stuff happening in the States right now as we speak of regarding that. Do you have any thoughts about that or feelings?
I think it's good to I think it's a tough, because I'm a musician, and sometimes I feel like I should bite my tongue and just
Right,
focus on
right.
music, but I do feel like who really does care? But but I do think when it comes to music, that's my strength, and I try to focus on that. But I do think that learning from history with what we're talking about, even if we look at Black Panther and Huey Newton, these were movements that were very inclusive of
Yeah.
not only a specific minority, but it was like all are welcome to support us. And I think that sentiment, I think, is important in these times, because it's easy for people to make generalizations these days as far as an opinion that I have, as far as what I see socially. And it's easy for people to be very divisive, but I think the only way that we will succeed is through love and through unity and supporting one another.
Right, right, right. Now, you mentioned sailing, and my understanding is Marinero is the Spanish word for sailor. And you have a song
That's
called
correct.
Maritime as well on the record.
Married to the sea, you don't have time for me. La Maria, un cascabel that chimes.
So
Yeah,
tell me why that's so important to you.
it was well, yeah, the name also is a play on words, just in the sense that north of San Francisco, on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge, the town of Marin is where I grew up.
Right.
So it's the name is kind of a way for me to honor my father and the fact that he sailed here, and also the idea that it's a Spanish word of my mom's origin. So it's a hybrid of the two.
Very
And I
cool.
just like the idea of playing on that theme. And I think that there's quite a few songs where I talk about the sailor, I talk about the ocean, or just as like these are themes within the Bay Area, being so close to the coast, but also just as a fun way to kind of like build this kind of mythology as a character. With maritime, it's kind of a play on words. There's a lot of cryptic lyrics in there, but it's a very personal sort of like love story that isn't necessarily about sailing, but it's more of like the idea of someone being married to the ocean and being
Right.
so occupied with their career or school that it's like sometimes you can't really be there. Like you're kind of like waiting at your widow's I forgot the widow's window or widow's peak. There's like these like a window waiting for your sailor to come home, and
Right.
they're off living this life and you're just waiting for them. The idea that just like people's paths don't always align, and people are off, one person might be too busy for another, that's kind of like the major idea of it. Was the only song on the record that was about relationships that I had like on the record, and I kind of wanted to make it like a little bit cryptic.
Right. Well, because I'm of a certain age, it reminded me of the song Brandy. You know that one? By looking, it was a big hit in like 1970, and the guy, it's basically about a guy who's telling his the girl that loves him that he's married to the sea, and my life, my lady is the sea. So
that's the same idea. That's the same idea, and it's like the reverse, where I'm playing maybe the one that's waiting on the coast, and the person I'm pining over or whatever is the sailor that's off at sea. So it's kind of a way for me to flip the role a little bit. I think we've all worn different hats in that type of scenario, but it was fun for me not to be the sailor in this narrative.
Very good. So the record's coming out in the end of May. Is that right? May 21st, I think.
May 21st. You're correct. Yeah.
So do you have plans for that? Are you going to be able to? Do you do gigs? Do you have a band that you play with? What are you?
Yeah, it's all kind of happening. It's interesting, Marty, where I moved to LA with aspirations, to start a band here, and I've had like my own list of talented musicians that I've kind of had as a dream scenario, and it's been really amazing to be able to reach out to a lot of these individuals and to start something with a lot of these people that I've been really interested in working with. So I've been fortunate to be working with people currently, and I'm kind of in the process of talking with booking agents and figuring that aspect out of, the conversations are happening now, and I'm sure, as you know, being in the music industry, like you're right now is a very exciting time with vaccines and with hope. And I think
Yep.
New Zealand has been free of or more secure with
Mostly, yeah.
mostly than
We're
I
just
think
getting our
most of their,
vaccination situation sorted out now.
yeah. But so it seems like there's hope on the
Yeah.
horizon in terms of like the fall, winter. So we're just basically trying to work for that. In terms of the release, I might have a few like live performances like that might be filmed that we'll
Right.
probably share around the release or maybe a little bit after that with my new band.
Yep.
But I'm basically just trying to gear towards getting this solid band together and
Cool.
and trying to schedule some tours.
So now that you've moved from San Francisco to LA, how do you think that's going to affect your music in the future? Is it going to change the way you sound?
Yeah, I think so. If I oh, can you still see me? I'm sorry.
No, I've seen. There you are.
Sorry.
That's all
Sorry
right.
about that. Yeah, I think it's one of those things where for some reason I'm very self-indulgent with my writing, where I write
Right.
a lot about my history or I write a lot about my experience, which is just been fun to use metaphors, or it's been fun to kind of like be a little bit autobiographical about it. But yeah, LA is definitely changing the sound. I think there's things that I want to grow with and utilize more. There's history here that I'd like to learn about, sing about. There's sonic things that I kind of attribute to LA, like when it comes to like Laurel Canyon or
Right.
Carole King and Burt Bacharach or a lot of these kind of legacy Capitol record recordings and these big bands and orchestrations and
Right.
Smile and
Yeah.
Pet Sounds and things like that. These are all kind of in the back of my mind for like where I'm going to continue, what direction I'm going into, to kind of maybe highlight that aspect of it. I basically want you to listen to the next record that I'm working on now and think, oh, this guy moved to LA.
It sounds pretty exciting though.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I love writing, so
Right.
it's just been fun and exciting to be in a new place. And whenever you travel, whenever you go to a new place, you're always going to be inspired and on many levels. So I think just being here and living here, meeting more friends, and that's all been very exciting, so
Excellent.
I absolutely think that it will affect the music.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking time to talk to me. I can't wait until the record comes out. Hope it does everything you want it to. I'll see if I can track down Conan Moccasin and tell him you said hi.
Oh, please, if you know him, yeah, tell him I'm a huge fan.
I will. All righty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Take care.